You know those moments when you're doing what you love in your business? Maybe it's standing on stage or creating content. Whatever it is, you're totally immersed and time just seems to slip by. This is called the flow state.
At Speaker Flow, we're obsessed with how to get you there more often. Each week, we're joined by a new expert where we share stories, strategies, and systems to help craft a business you love. Welcome to Technically Speaking.
We did it! Look at us go. We are live. Jason, a glutton for punishment, I see, joining us on Technically Speaking. Welcome.
Hey, I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. I was just on your show. Was that last week or was it this week?
It was last week. It feels like yesterday.
Yeah. It does feel like yesterday.
Oh,
yeah, we had a fun conversation.
Wonderful moment. It was great.
Yeah, definitely. Well, really excited to unpack more of what you do here on the show. I think it's a phrase and a take that I haven't heard before in the context of communication, and we love perspective. And so unpacking everything you do and why that matters to our listeners is going to be a fun journey today.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here and sharing your brain with us.
I love it.
Heck yeah. So I'm curious. So the background in communication, that's kind of what your expertise is, right? Speak with people, not at them. We're going to talk more about that here in a moment. But communication doesn't seem like something, you like as a kid, you were like, when I grow up, that is the thing to be doing. I would imagine there was some evolution of stumbling upon things to get to the conclusions of where you are today. So give us a little bit about your backstory, like why speak with people and how did you end up as an expert in communication?
Why are you the way you are, Jason?
Yeah, why are you the way that you are?
Well,
thank you, Michael Scott.
Yeah, right. Oh, we could just probably do a whole episode on office quotes and
we're there for it.
The power of those. I actually want to do a whole series on the Speak with People podcast, communicating from an office standpoint, and just kind of break down each one. I want to do one on the office, then I want to do one on Ted Lasso. And so I got to figure out. Yeah.
I got to Jeff Harry. Jeff Harry has a podcast called Ted Lasso Leadership. It's awesome. So good. Yeah.
I got to check it out. I grew up in the city of Detroit and wanted to be a baseball player. Wanted to be a Detroit Tiger my entire life. And when I was 11 years old, my parents took me to some type of event where there was like multiple speakers on the stage and a comedian. And then this person was talking about, this. And I was just a kid, but really at 11 years old, I was like, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. So
wow.
The very next week I went home and I built a stage in my basement.
No way.
And so
this literally was when I grow up. This is what I want to do.
This is the first time ever on this show. People,
I was
groundbreaking right here.
Holy crap. Okay. Yep. Tell me more.
Yep. So I built a stage. My mom made she still does, the world's best chocolate chip cookies. So I went to all my friends, bribe them like crazy to come listen to me in hopes that they would get the cookies afterwards. So, it was a little bit of a, but I was okay with it. So I then welcomed everybody. I got on stage at 11 years old in my basement, did my little spiel, it was like part comedy, part, whatever. And then they got their cookies. And so I started to do that. My mom still has some cassette tapes because I know I'm looking like a spring chicken probably, across the screens, but I'm coming up to the big 5-0. So she has cassette tapes of me like doing these little, messages, talks, keynotes, comedian things to my neighborhood friends. So I've always loved speaking. I've always loved the speaking process. I've loved getting in front of people. And so I always say that I'm part entertainer, part education, motivator. So I'm not going to wow you with deep stats and, all that kind of stuff. But man, I'm going to tell you a story that's going to make you laugh at one end, hold your side, and then pull your heartstrings, and just kind of get all the emotions going. So yeah, that's kind of my thing. Believe it or not, for many years, I actually worked for a church. And so I worked in the church world. And because of that, I was in front of people all the time. and I loved it. The part I didn't really like about it is, my brain, like we were just talking about, always thinks in like Michael Scott and that's what she said comments and, all that kind of sarcasm. And so I had to get a really quick filter, or I'd get some church people upset at me uh, pretty quick. But about a year ago, I left that world. In the midst of that, I traveled and spoke for years at conferences and camps and lots of student events and tours. And then I just started years ago, I started teaching people how to communicate. I went from being like super Jason consumed. Jason is the greatest thing in the history of the world to like, I just want to help other people connect with their audience. And so that's where Speak with People came from. About 15 years ago, I was at an event and I was like, I think there's a giant difference between communicators who are just on stage to promote their agenda, to remind us how great they are, to be the hero of the story, to dispense lots of great and helpful information, but stuff that's not sticking, or the communicator who's taking us on a journey, who's putting the audience's needs above their own, who's presenting an opportunity for us to be able to change our lives because of what they're presenting. So anyways, the with and at kind of framework came to be. So I thought I came up with it. I was so proud of it. I'm like, finally, once in my life I came up with something cool. And I found out about 6 months ago that the great Vin Scully, LA Dodger baseball announcer, said, "Speak with people, not at them," about 30 years ago. So that was it.
Hey, sometimes good messages don't need new voices, but new amplifiers. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
that's, yeah. Well, what's interesting about that story to me is like you mentioned this very briefly. It seems like there's a meta layer here. You kind of talked about how like there's somebody on stage that's about them versus somebody on stage where it's about the audience. But just a moment prior to that, you mentioned how in the early days it was like me, Jason, 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 and then some switch happened where it was more about them and less about you. Can you speak more about that transition? Did this
Ooh.
happen around the same time you came up with, or I mean, amplified the speak with people, not at them thing? Yeah, fill me in there.
Yeah. So the long and the short of it is, I went through a couple of massive failures in my life. So my 20s were all about Jason, giant head, wanted to be the best ever. One of my favorite baseball players is Ted Williams. There's Ted Williams stuff all over the wall. Ted Williams, when he grew up, he wanted to be the greatest hitter that had ever lived. Actually, his goal was, I want to walk down the street and I want people to say, "There goes Ted Williams, the best hitter ever." Now, Ted was pretty cocky and confident, and the media hated him. I mean, there's just all those kind of stories. But Ted practiced all the time. Last player to hit over 400, 406 in 1941. So, anyways, as a kid, I fell in love with Ted Williams, and I started thinking to myself, I want to be that kind of speaker. I want to be the kind of speaker who gets off the stage and people are like, "Oh my goodness, that guy just spoke right to me." And there were hundreds of people in this in this room. That's kind of what I wanted to be able to do. And so I kind of had a big giant head. Anyways, fast forward 2005, I hosted this giant event. It was like 4 stages and 50 bands and multiple speakers and comedians and inflatable event. It was a giant festival for families. And I went for it, took all the big giant risks. I'm like, this is going to be it. And it just flopped. It flopped hard. I lost a lot. I lost a lot. I lost, so much of my pride. I can remember it was like June 3rd, 2005. I'm standing in this field at like 3 a.m. and I'm just, I'm screaming at God. I'm screaming at myself. I'm screaming at anybody who will listen to me. Like, why did this thing have to fail? And that night, it was kind of like, I think I've been going about this the wrong way. I think I've been making it all about me. Maybe that's what's, going the wrong way. So just kind of diverted plans a little bit and said, what if, I read Dale Carnegie's stuff. It was the first book I ever read when I was 18, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Somehow I got through, all of school without reading an entire book. And someone handed me that book and I'm like, shoot, dang, I can do this. And so I got back there. It was about 2005, and I went, I got to go about this a different way. So yeah, I'm still selfish. I'm still too cocky and confident and all that stuff sometimes. But as much as I can, I'm trying to be as audience focused, others focused, and help them succeed. Because I'm finding the more I'm really helping others succeed, the more it really does come back. It's just such a weird, deal. So that was it. Like, it was a massive failure. I was embarrassed. Back in 2005, I was on the radio. This is kind of before, internet and all that. So I was on the radio and I was speaking at all these places. And so my failure was, visible to everyone. Actually, I walked into a room once, a gathering of leaders, and they're like, "Oh, hey, I just want you to know, like, I'm making sure I don't rates my event, as in, fail."
Oh, yikes.
And,
Ouch.
and I was like, I grew up in the city of Detroit. I'm like scrappy. I'm like, I got beat up by, I tell people all the time, I got beat up by like all colors of people. I got beat up by black kids and Arab kids and white kids. And like, I'm a little scrappy. So I'm like, I'm about to throw down with you. But I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'll just walk forward. So that's kind of when my approach changed. And, I still love to communicate. I still love to be on stages. There's nothing better than captivating an audience or seeing the aha moment when you see it in their eyes, like, wow, this just clicked. And they're leaning in with you. But I love to help other people experience that moment, because it's just so much fun to see other people win. So that's the meta version. I kind of gave you the the little deeper
Oh,
That's
version.
exactly what I wanted. Thank you.
yeah, I love it, dude. Well, there's so many people that talk about communication skills, and I think we all like can inherently agree that it's important to be a good communicator. The definition of which I want you to explain for me in just a second here, but you know what it's like to like have that shift from your own personally lived experience. And it's backed by the craft that you've spent your entire life focused on developing. So, like, you've got a really unique perspective coming to this conversation with, which I appreciate about you.
Yeah.
And because of that, or segueing off of that, communication skills kind of feels like one of those things that we all talk about, like we're all talking about the same thing, when in reality, I don't even know if we are a lot of the time. So before we get into like the specifics here, can you give us a shared definition of what you're talking about when you talk about improving communication skills?
Absolutely. So many people talk about, I want to be an effective communicator. I want to be an effective communicator. And I think it's fine to want to be effective. Here's just what I've learned working for organizations for 25 plus years, being around tons of communicators. You can still be a major ass and be effective. You can still be a giant tool and hurt people with your communication and your leadership and be effective. So the heart behind Speak with People is we want to help leaders. We want to elevate the importance and practice of healthy communication in leaders' lives. And so we want you to be a well-rounded, holistically healthy communicator. And so we say all the time, at the end of the day, we help leaders improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's to a team, from a stage, or from behind a screen. So we like to say healthy communication is oxygen for your relationships and your leadership. So not everyone considers himself to be a leader, but if you have influence, like John Maxwell says, you're a leader. So how are you going to spend that currency? Because communication is currency. It's how I influence people. It's how I close a sale. It's how I start a new relationship. It's how I realistically breathe life into people. Just like, oxygen coming into my lungs, I can do that with my communication. So, we talk a lot about healthy communication and being someone who breathes life into people with their words, with their nonverbals, with their actions. So that kind of just gives you a little bit more of when we're talking about communication, what we talk about. So.
Yeah. Well, I want you to build on this a little bit more. So, and I think this has to do with the whole idea of speaking with people and not at them. In my mind, that sounds really good. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds. But then I go down the path of like, what does that actually mean? Like with versus at
Yeah,
truly, where's the line in the
absolutely.
sand? And basically my core question here is what does healthy communication look like?
Absolutely. Yeah, we say all the time, when I speak with people, I'm choosing to communicate in a healthy way. When I'm speaking at people, I'm choosing to communicate in an unhealthy way. At happens all the time, right? Like my wife and I have 5 kids. So until we adopted number 5. So we adopted him from China. That's a whole other crazy story. You want to talk about communication? Spend 3 weeks in China and try to communicate. um, but he also has autism and just a slew of sensory disorders and difficulties. So all of this build up to when my older kids were younger. Sometimes I spoke at them. I was loud. I yelled at them. You know, I was too sarcastic. Those kind of things. Having a 9-year-old adopted son with autism and sensory stuff, anything loud is just it just if I take him into a men's bathroom and the blower goes on, you would think that somebody's like digging knives into his ear. So we don't yell anymore in our household. We don't do those kind of things. So when we think of with and at, especially from an upfront stage communication, when we speak with people, we're bringing them on the journey. To borrow some of Donald Miller's terminology, we're making them the hero of that journey, and we're just the guide. So we're bringing them along, and we're helping them get to a place where they can make, a healthy decision. When we're speaking at people, the best example I have is I just don't know a politician, not to get political, not to get people riled up on either side. I just don't know a politician who does not speak at people. I watch all of these politicians, they throw each other under the bus. Everybody's upset and angry, and then you go on the social media and it's all of this just ugliness all the time. I'm like, okay, that is a pure definition of I'm speaking at someone. If I'm sitting in the seats and I'm listening to someone and I'm going, okay, are they taking me on a journey, or are they just spending the entire time telling me how great they are and how I should jump on the bandwagon of being their greatest supporter? It gets down to pretty quick going, okay, this person is healthy, it's taking me on a journey. This person is just speaking at me, they're dispensing information and hoping that I catch along with it.
Yeah. So I feel like that speaks to like the intentionality of the person that's speaking, right? Making it more about the person that you're speaking with rather than about yourself. What does it look like
Yeah,
practically? Like how does the conversation differ when you're speaking with somebody versus at them?
absolutely. If you go to speakwithpeople.com, we actually have a with or at quiz. So there's a with or at quiz that kind of helps you break down. So if I am someone who is speaking at people, so there's some kind of toxic characteristics of this, or some negative characteristics. One, I haven't prioritized my health. So my internal health, my external health. I mean, typically, if I'm not taking care of my health, eventually there's a pretty great chance that what's going to come out of my mouth is going to be unhealthy, right? I'm going to lash out on someone. I'm going to, talk with too much confidence or pride or arrogance or those kind of things. So if I'm continually speaking at people, I'm not taking care of my health. That means you're emotional, mental, physical, relational, you're just not investing it all in yourself. You're consumed with yourself. I remember as an early speaker, I was so consumed with myself. Will they like me? Will these stories make sense? Will they laugh? Will I get asked back? I just turned it all into myself. And all those questions aren't bad. Speakers should, you know, want to be the best they can and tell stories that connect and all of those things. But we get so wrapped up in ourselves that definitely it puts up this barrier between us and the audience. A couple more of the ats. I allow worry to win. I just start worrying about all those questions instead of being so obsessed about helping my audience win. What if I took that energy from being obsessed with me winning and I'm like, okay, how can I help solve the very real problems my audience is going through. Things like other things my research and study are lacking. I mean, we pick up pretty quickly communicators who just kind of get up and wing it. I mean, I love improv comedians, but they can get away with it, right? But if you're paid to speak somewhere, you got to know your stuff and you got to be ready. And that kind of leads into your prep time. Your prep time is weak and thrown together. A couple other I don't value clarity. Like one of the biggest is when you're listening to a speaker and you just know they may not even know what they're talking about. They've just put a bunch of stuff together and they hope that it just fits. A couple other I starve my audience from creativity. I mean, we have every opportunity to be creative. It doesn't matter if you're, a wildly creative artist or not. We can pull video clips and pictures and, handout things. I'm doing a training in Nashville next month and I'm already thinking through, okay, what's something that I can tangibly put in? It's for bankers, so I'm like, what can I tangibly put in their hands that will make them go, I never saw that coming, but will trigger it, so those are some a couple more I drown people in information, unless it's, a data or research kind of study, I drown them. I tell stories that are clinical and not applicable. A lot of times we just tell stories because maybe they got a good hook, but they don't match up with the material. I don't see laughter as a partner. People who speak at people, what I found from experience is they don't really lean into laughter too much. I talk down to people. We all kind of have sat there and listened to that speaker who I'm like, wow, you really are talking down to me. And then I'm the hero of all my stories. When I tell stories, I got to tell you what I did right here. And so I just went through them super quick, but those are, some of the characteristics of, I call them being an at-hole of, someone.
Yeah. Nice.
Yes. Oh, that's funny.
I had never thought of that until our little business. We're a year old. We launched our own conference back in March called the Speakers Conference. And we did it in Clearwater Beach, which is I'm about 20 miles from Clearwater Beach. You wake up, you're right there on the Gulf. It's the sun and the ocean and the pool. I mean, it's a great location, but we're going through this and it just dawned on me on stage. I'm like, stop being an at-hole when you speak.
Heck yeah.
And that was
a book
it.
title.
I'm like, if I get brave enough, that might be, because right now, we're working on the book, Speak with People, Not at Them. But I'm like, oh, that would be best. Like, stop being
like an add-on, an add-on to the book,
Yes.
The uncensored version. Yeah. Okay, so something that I'm thinking about here is, let's say I take a quiz and it gives me shining colors. I'm speaking with people. I feel good about myself. Great. How do I know I've gotten off track without being aware that to go take the quiz again? Like what are some indicators in my everyday conversations and relationships and communication that could help me raise a yellow flag to say, hey, you're maybe speaking at them? Like, I'd imagine there are elements of what you just said of all the different examples, but like in a real conversation sense, like how can I be self-aware enough to say I'm being an at-hole right now?
Yeah. Well, that's good. I think first and foremost, you've really got to have a close core group of people that, who I call them my home team. They're those, 4 or 5 leaders that I'm like, hey, you got to shoot super straight with me. Let me know, are my social media posts coming across like I'm the, king of the world? These are the people that I'm sending, my reels to. These are the people that, they're watching some of my stuff, or I'll share my docs and I'm just going, okay, is this happening? So, I think having those people that can really speak into you, because what I found is I love being on stage. And so there's nothing better getting on stage, hearing a room full of laughter, taking them on a journey. It's just incredible. So if I'm not being at a place where I'm legitimately going, hey, I'm giving you permission to speak into my life, I got to make sure that I'm doing that. I'm just making sure, hey, I got this group of people that can say, hey, here's where you're at. And I think people who are in this place of speaking at people all the time, whether it's face to face over a screen like we are right now, on a stage, or even if I lead a team of people and I'm speaking at them, you're going to find out after a while you're only going to go so far. Like, the phone's going to stop ringing. Your coworkers aren't going to want to work near you, and so having that core team who can really ask them those questions, I think is huge. And then two, I think, like I talked about at the very beginning of the at stuff, is self-awareness doesn't happen overnight, but if you invest in your health, we've written a thing at Speak with People called the Pathway. So it's a step-by-step guide to becoming a more confident, clear, and captivating communicator. So Speak with People doesn't necessarily, I believe we can help the professional speaker who, is doing, all this incredible stuff, spoken to thousands. But really, we started Speak with People, and I think about one of my best friends, Michael. He's a chiropractor up in Michigan. He speaks every day to clients. He's doing Zoom trainings with other doctors. He wants to start a YouTube channel, but he's trying to figure out, can he communicate, on screen. We started to Speak with People to help those leaders, because we believe every leader has an incredible message inside of them that has to be told. So we've created this thing called the Pathway that kind of helps you walk through each step to becoming that healthy, confident, and clear communicator. So step number one is to assess and prioritize your health. And so if you're regularly going, hey, my health is important, I got to take care of this, there's a greater odds that you're going to steer away from those negative things. Now, you all know we get into seasons of stress and all this, stuff that weighs us down, and we lean away from that stuff. But if we're making sure that's an investment, we put it on our calendar, we're taking care of it, it's going to help greatly. And then I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot at Speak with People is, we've been given 2 ears. I didn't say this. I don't know who did. 2 ears, 1 mouth. So why do we talk so much? I think it's an 80-20 principle. We do a healthy communication employee training for companies. So I'm doing a lot of this communication skills training with bank managers right now and financial advisors. And, especially people in the sales world, right? We want to jump in and we want to start talking, and this is what this is what we can do. And instead of, let's ask some really valuable questions 20% of our time, and then 80% just listen, so we can pick out, what are they dreaming about? What do they really need? What's going on? What's their story? So I can be the guide, come along with them and help them get to those places. So I think that's a couple, 1, 2, 3 kind of ways that we can make sure we're steering away from some of that unhealthy at stuff with our communication.
Yeah, really good. A couple of phrases come to mind that Taylor and I toss around pretty regularly. One is, you can't read the label while you're in the bottle. And so looking for an outside perspective can help you spot things that probably you would look past on your own, because you just can't always see. So that's valuable for any area of life. And other phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. Like, you have to be the person that's positioned to be a good communicator before you can even worry about the tactics. You can't improve something if the foundation is already crap underneath it. So I think both of those are huge. And I'm curious, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this. Like, I'll just speak for myself here, right? Like, I spend 40 plus hours a week, every single week, in Zoom meetings with people. Like, I talk all the time, too much some days, it feels like. So, like, I can think of myself as a pretty good communicator. I think probably most of the people who listen to the show feel like they're pretty good communicators. And also, I'm sitting here going, gosh, dang, I can get so much better at this. And so, going to your website, checking out your resources and things, like finding some small, simple actions to improve. I think we're all in that court. You've watched people go through this process a bunch. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that people run into as they're working on improving their communication skills? And what would you recommend they do to solve the problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just piggyback on what you're saying, you're so right. Like, so many of us communicate all the time. We just kind of take it for granted, like breathing. Like, it's just something that we do, but we take a punch to the chest or we get an infection. We realize really quickly, boy, we should have been taking a look at that. And the same thing with investing in communication skills. There's so many great studies that show that as leaders invest in their communication skills, they're the first ones typically to be promoted, to receive honors, to make bigger sales, all that kind of stuff. So taking those steps, the things that I find is, one, pride just gets in the way, right? I mean, especially for, type A leaders who are like, I'm killing it. Like, I'm doing my thing. I'm going to do it the way I've always done it. That's okay. I mean, that's good, but you at least got to let your pride down a minute to go, there are things that I can still learn, because things are changing. I mean, we're in the biggest communication change that we've seen in, hundreds of years. The first time we've got boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Zers, all working together. I mean, the boomers are working later into life, longer than ever before. And so now we've got people who are working, Walmart, you've got a boomer working with a Gen Zer. And the Gen Zer, they're used to every information that quick. They don't wait, so we're just at this communication, it's a crazy crossroads. And so we got to get over our pride to go, you know what? A coach or some type of investment in my communication will help me in the long run. It could help you as a dad. It could help you as a spouse. It could help you as a teammate. It could help you as a whatever role you're doing, that pride will be able to get through. And then the thick skin thing, right? Speakers, like, we say all the time, hey, give me some feedback on my talk, and internally we're like, oh, I hope they don't, hit me too hard. You got to get over that. Like, you got to welcome, that's for me been the toughest challenge of starting my own, because Speak with People, I do speaking. We offer training for companies, and then coaching. So, I do private coaching. We launched a course to help communicators. And so we've got a podcast and a weekly blog. So I broke some of the rules. The rules are focus on one thing. And instead I'm like, well, we're going to focus on, starting a company this way. And so, find whatever tool and resource you can, and just, invest in it a little bit each week. So your thing can get thinner and thinner, and, you can do that. So I ask people all the time, what do you think Speak with People's about? What can we improve in our brand? What can we improve? And it's hard to receive that feedback, but you've got to be able to go, hey, it's how I'm going to grow through this. Evaluated experience is the best way to grow. And so I think that's a couple ways that we can kind of continue pushing through and growing.